Is this real? And the person's like, yeah, it's real.
Wait, what? Wait, no, what the fuck?
The craziest trade in NBA history just went down.
The most stunning, out of nowhere, shocking trade in the history of sports.
My hands were shaking.
I still cannot believe that this is the reality that we are living in right now.
Cannot think of any other moment
Oh my goodness!
where I have been more shocked.
It quite literally doesn't make any sense.
It never happens.
My heart is legit beating.
They're gonna get Luka Doncic. What?
Dallas Mavericks have Luka goddamn Doncic, and they traded for Anthony Davis.
What sense does that make for the Mavericks?
It sounds make-believe. This is a more stunning trade than if the Lakers announced they were trading Austin Reeves for me.
This is the worst trade I've seen an NBA team make in my entire life. For nearly as long as the NBA has been around, there have been those who believe the NBA is rigged, that it's following a script of some kind. I'm not one to buy into such a notion, but if the NBA is scripted, then the Luka trade was jumping the shark. Never have I ever seen such a baffling transaction. There is nothing to even compare it to across any sport, and there likely never will be. It broke the internet and the brains of everyone in the NBA world, from the fans to the players to the organization heads. Everything was turned upside down. The Luka trade became the talk of the NBA for months on end. It was everywhere to the degree that I was getting texts from friends and family who never so much as looked at a basketball. But here we are a year later, and we have a whole lot more to discuss. So much has changed for every party involved. Reputations burned, backs stabbed, jobs lost, and the future of the NBA as we know it is completely turned on its head. Welcome to NBA Deep Dive. When I get home from a long, hard day of talking about basketball, I'm ready to get comfy. My old chair just didn't cut it anymore. It was wobbly, it had no support, and it made long sessions a pain. So when FlexiSpot reached out with their C7 Max, I was ready for an upgrade. This chair is built different. First, the adjustability is incredible. You can dial in everything. The 3D headrest tilts perfectly to your neck. The entire backrest moves up and down, and you can even customize the seat depth for your legs. And the comfort is next level. But my favorite part? The flexibility. You can recline back and pop out the footrest to relax or even sit cross-legged comfortably. It adapts to you. From my experience, whether I'm working, gaming, or just relaxing, this chair delivers. And you can try it with zero risk thanks to their 30-day return policy backed by a solid 10-year warranty. To get the best deal, use my code C750 to get $50 off of your C7 Max. The link is in the description. Also, if you're on a budget, check out their great C5 chair. And thanks again to FlexiSpot. On February 1st at the dead of night, Shams tweeted that Luka had been traded to the Los Angeles Lakers. This was such a shock to the system that everyone came to the same conclusion: Shams had been hacked. No one believed that a team that was in the NBA Finals 7 months ago would trade away their 25-year-old superstar, let alone for such a weak return. Then Shams clarified that the trade was indeed real, and all hell broke loose.
Fire Nico! Fire Nico! Fire Nico!
They traded a franchise centerpiece, the face of the franchise, for a bag of Skittles.
It doesn't matter to me if they win. It doesn't matter. I would rather lose with Luka, and people can say, oh, if they win 5 championships in a row, that's not going to happen.
Well, I wanted them to lose because they need to feel, AD's already injured.
I loved this team, and for them to just rip the heart of our future out is disgusting.
Me personally, I was getting ready to go to sleep. I had literally just put my phone away after the mandatory before bed doom scroll when suddenly Rudy texted me a screenshot of the Shams tweet, to which I replied, and I quote, "Huh? What? What? Huh?" On the drive to the office, I tried to process the whole thing, and after about 20 minutes of sitting with it, we clicked record. I said some words, but I immediately forgot about all of it. After I got home post-upload, I couldn't fall asleep because I was in a daze trying to wrap my head around it. I couldn't understand it, and even a year later, I still really don't. This video remains the most viewed video on that Also Rusty Buckets channel, and if you look at every big NBA YouTuber's most viewed video, it's almost guaranteed to be a reaction to the Luka trade. Hell, the second most viewed video on that channel was a follow-up 1 month later, so you can see why we chose to make this video. Once Luka made his debut, it still didn't feel real. He didn't look right in those busted-ass highlighter yellow jerseys. Do not get me started on those ugly-ass banana jerseys. Naturally, Lakers fans were ecstatic because, obviously, after winning the 2020 title, the Lakers had spent the remainder of the decade as huge disappointments. They made a disastrous Russell Westbrook trade, moving him to the Jazz later to be bought out, and then they did make a conference finals appearance in 2023, but with AD's injury issues and father time very slowly, but still surely eventually catching up to LeBron, there wasn't really much of a future for this team. Although they are the Lakers, so they probably would have scammed their way into a new superstar in some shape or form. They have an entire history of fleecing teams for their top-end talent, which we went over in our immediate deep dive following the Luka trade, but that was the reaction of Lakers fans. What about Dallas? How are they doing?
Turning general manager Nico Harrison into their punching bag, both figuratively and literally. Back outside, they donned shirts they say security banned during the game.
He had to pull his betrayed sticker off, just off his shirt.
Immediately, security was like, take that off.
Yeah, Dallas was about 2 steps removed from undergoing martial law. Never before has there been this seismic of a migration from an NBA fan base. Many Mavericks fans became ex-Mavericks fans that day, rightfully so. No reason to judge them for that. Screw that. The ones that stuck around really only had one thing to say.
Fire Nico! Fire Nico!
Well, who is this Nico fella anyways? Nico Harrison was the immediate target of most of the vitriol as the man who pulled the trigger, and deservingly so, because he had been the general manager since 2021 when he and new head coach Jason Kidd joined the franchise simultaneously. Before Dallas, he worked as a VP at Nike, where he famously botched a pitch to Steph Curry because he pronounced his name Stephon, so kind of a chronic, huge mistake maker. You'd think having such a monumental fuck-up would hurt his job security and prevent this from ever happening, but failing upwards is pretty easy if you know the right people. There are a few people who think that Nico's hand was forced and it was actually ownership that was behind all of this. When Nico first started with the Mavs, he answered to the then majority owner Mark Cuban, who was notoriously hands-on with his approach and was kind of the exception to the rule of meddling owners are bad. But by 2023, Mark Cuban had sold multi-billion-dollar amounts of shares in the franchise, which meant that he was no longer the majority owner.
But I can't remember an owner selling control of his team and then still remaining in control of the actual basketball operations. The difference now is it won't be his team, so we'll see how strong that hold is or how tenuous it might be.
Even if his original deal allegedly put him in a position of authority within the organization so he could still be involved, he ultimately wasn't the person with the final say anymore. If Nico cooked up this deal and presented it to Mark Cuban, his ass would have been fired on the spot, and then Mark would have gone and cradled Luka and whispered sweet nothings into his ear. Instead, when Nico sent the deal to upper management for approval, it was the Adelsons who just trusted Nico's judgment. They knew that the team gained a ton of extra revenue from a finals run, but from their point of view, Nico was more or less the architect of that near title, which is why when he pitched trading their superstar less than a year later, they listened.
There have been a million theories about why you did the deal. One of them was that you were told to do it, that Mr. Dumont said, I didn't want to give the Supermax contract, which is obviously very expensive, to Luka. were you told that you had to trade him?
No, not at all. Patrick reminds me of the leadership that I had at Nike, and a really good leader doesn't tell the people that work for them what to do. It's a collective, well thought out process to make a big move like that. And then also, unfortunately, I'm super stubborn, so someone telling me to do something doesn't work too well for me.
My opinion on that narrative is that if it's true, if Nico is just the fall guy, then he's a damn fool, and we should clown on him regardless. What exactly was the benefit for him being the fall guy here? Getting fired less than a year later, being one of the most hated men in American sports from then till probably still now, having zero chance in hell of ever landing a job in management again or in the realm of professional sports at large, becoming one of the biggest lolcows in the history of professional sports. Was it worth becoming the go-to example of a terrible GM to the point where describing someone getting screwed over is called pulling a Nico?
Standing there and there's thousands of people chanting for you to be fired. That's an experience that none of us, no one's chanting for for us to lose our jobs. Why shouldn't you be fired?
Well, one, I think I've done a really good job here.
Like, did he just get some massive under-the-table payment that made it worth no longer having a career? Did he sign an NDA and he'd be sued to hell if he spoke out? Did he do something heinous and they have video of it? Like, unless they got some Epstein tier blackmail on this guy, what could possibly be worth knowingly tarnishing your reputation to this degree? Money is money, but the moment you're in the grave, all you take with you is your reputation. And now his tombstone will read, Nico Harrison, loving husband and father, and slack-jawed idiot. One way or the other, his decision-making is to blame for the hate that he's received, even if it would possibly be better to direct that hate at ownership. But I'm not really in that camp, because there were already signs of Nico having a weird, almost vendetta against Doncic. A vendetta that stemmed from Luka's apparent lack of care for his conditioning and overall health. Nico apparently saw how Luka's body wasn't that of a conventional athlete and probably read his foreign sensibilities as antithetical to the American way of hard work and success. He seemed to believe that Luka's body, while being able to facilitate historical basketball talent, was a ticking time bomb. Nico was rumored to have not even wanted to give Luka a max contract because he felt that by the end of the deal, it would be a massive overpay. One of Nico's first moves as GM was firing Casey Smith, Jeremy Holsapple, and Casey Spangler, all three being part of the Mavericks training/medical staff, and all three having close relationships with Doncic. This seems paradoxical because if you're trying to promote a healthier lifestyle for Luka, how is firing core members of your training staff, all of which are close to your franchise player, a good way of doing that? Luka was even reporting to have complained that they get rid of everyone I like damn near systemically. This is a weird way to treat your franchise player. I'm not saying they need to hand him the keys to the franchise Le GM style, but shit, there has to be some kind of happy medium here. Ramona Shelburne and Tim McMahon from ESPN reported that this trade had actually been a long time coming. Nico Harrison had skepticism around Luka that wasn't really shared by the other figures in the organization, but in spite of his talent, Nico was hyper-fixated on the negative aspects of his game, and everyone else in the organization had to follow his lead, as they increasingly chose to police Luka's actions. There is, of course, that infamous video of Luka having a beer taken out of his hands during the post-game celebration of advancing to the NBA Finals. Let this poor boy have his beer. This dude was basically groomed into being a professional basketball player. He was sent to a pro basketball school when he was like 13. And over a decade later, he gets his team to the NBA Finals in a glorious culmination of all of that hard work. And he can't have one fucking beer. It seemed like Nico was just fiending for an excuse to trade the guy. And when another major injury caused Luka to backslide on his conditioning, suddenly an opportunity presented itself. I don't want to suggest that ownership takes no blame here. This certainly wouldn't have ever happened if Mark Cuban remained the team's majority owner, but at the same time, we have every reason to believe Nico is the one that initiated this. It started with a sit-down with Rob Pelinka, as he and Nico had a long history from representing Kobe back in the day. He floated the idea of a Luka AD swap, and Rob thought he was doing a fucking bit. Believe me, I'm the last guy to deny evil doing by billionaire owners. Like, for real, fuck these people. Especially that dope who said that Shaq was a hard worker. If you need any evidence of just how completely out of touch with the NBA world these owners were, including Shaq as an example of hard work beating talent, should tell you all that you need to know. Their incompetence is a great example of the lie of meritocracy. These people are not smarter than you just because they have money. But everything we know points to this being Nico's idea. Ownership should have stepped in and stopped this madman. They are culpable in that. But at the end of the day, trusting your GM too much is far less of a sin than the GM himself pulling the trigger. I mean, Nico didn't even shop Luka around the league. He just conspired with his bestie in LA, Rob Pelinka. But one way or the other, Nico Harrison has to own his part in all of this.
And you'll see next year when our team comes back, we're going to be competing for a championship.
Nothing was more discussed than the latest bullshit excuse the front office had to offer. The most famous one coming straight from Nico's mouth. Defense wins championships.
Defense wins championships, and we are hanging our hat on defense.
Fans chanted "Fire Nico" all the way until their season with new franchise player Anthony Davis resulted in just a measly play-in berth. This was in spite of Kyrie Irving tearing his ACL just 1 month after being promoted into Luka's empty role as the lead ball handler. Yet another detail that made the Luka trade stupid for Dallas, because there is just no evidence to suggest that Kyrie is a first option on a championship team. I mean, he was technically the point guard for the 2016 Cavaliers, but we all know that LeBron James was the guy on that team. But speaking of LeBron over in LA, right as Luka donned the banana drapes, things were almost immediately looking up, though it took some time for him to warm up after missing so much time. Luckily, after sitting out one game against the Trailblazers, the idealized Luka Lakers era truly began to reveal itself. In his first truly healthy game with the Lakers, he put up 32 points and got the W, as LA would go on a 7-game win streak. From that game onwards, Luka would average 38 and 8 on 60% true shooting, including nearly 40% from 3 on 10 attempts a game. He seemed to gel pretty well with the Lakers roster previously led by LeBron. They finished the season with 50 wins in total and the 3rd seed in a competitive Western Conference, playing slightly above 500 basketball after that win streak ended. This is where I need to give my praise to JJ Redick, because for a first-year head coach to handle this much turmoil this well, he should get more credit than he did. The Lakers still managed to be a top-end regular season defense without Anthony freaking Davis. Unfortunately, as I called out going into the playoffs, this defense was very gimmicky. JJ was doing everything in his power to hide the weak defensive personnel on this team, but that could only go so far. So, despite having home court advantage, they got beat in 5 games versus a hungry Timberwolves team where Luka averaged 30.7 rebounds and 5 assists on 60% true shooting while playing 41 minutes a game. But those numbers are good evidence of how stats can be a little bit deceiving. They oversell his performance. Luka was really sluggish at times, especially when it came to ISOing on Rudy Gobert. Just last year, Luka killed this guy every time that they dared to make a switch. This year, the Timberwolves were intentionally giving Luka that switch, and it was effective enough to keep LA from winning more than just one game. But that's all fine, right? Like, Lakers fans knew that this probably wasn't their year, and they had a whole offseason ahead of them where who knows what they might pull off. Meanwhile, in Dallas, well, if the NBA is scripted, this is where the ironic twists of fate start to unravel. With no Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis playing through an injury in the play-in, they were eliminated and thus did not make the playoffs. But that also meant that they did make the draft lottery, where things started to look a lot less grim. Because regrettably, despite having just a 1.8% chance, the Mavericks got the #1 pick in the draft. And yet another generational cold-ass white boy.
The work we never see. Comes to this guy. From Nembhard. Little hesitation. Then flicks it up to the baseline. So to speak. But another one-handed finish for Dallas. And then run. He doesn't necessarily run. He got a shot up and hit.
I say regrettably because as far as the franchise themselves goes, they didn't deserve this shit at all. This was Wall Street bailout levels of complete bullshit. If you believed Luka going to the Lakers was a conspiracy before, then this fueled that fire like kerosene. For a franchise to show themselves to be this level of incompetent on this big of a scale, just to land the #1 pick, it's just nasty. I don't like saying that it is completely undeserved, because the Mavericks fans who managed to stick around after the trade deserved a player like Flagg to ease their pain. There were a lot of other NBA franchises that could use some pain easing, and those teams didn't commit malpractice. There is damn near a consensus from NBA fans that this draft in particular was rigged to land Cooper in Dallas. And it's understandable why they would believe that, because it makes sense for the NBA to intervene. Things were so volatile with the franchise that it could be a financial disaster for Dallas and subsequently the league as a whole. Apparently, the best way to get a young superstar for free is by shooting yourself in the foot. As much as Nico tried to pretend after the fact that getting the pick was all a part of the plan, there is just no way that landing Cooper Flagg was in this man's master plan. He fully intended on Dallas making a playoff push. You don't do that if you're trying to get a lottery pick. That does not compute. In the offseason, the only addition Nico made besides for Flagg was D'Angelo Russell. Need I say more? And then Dallas started the season looking like a joke of a team, and fans finally got what they'd been asking for, and Nico was fired on November 11th, 2025, just 9 months after getting fleeced by his bestie in LA. But in terms of the Mavs' remaining pieces to build around Flagg, this is weak sauce, and they don't have any assets to spice up that sauce until quite a while. Their core from their 2025 finals run built around Luka has amounted to next to nothing for their next era. Those trades really only make sense if Luka is here. All the draft picks that Nico spent trading for some key role players are now gone. Their 2027 first-round pick was traded to the Hornets for PJ Washington, a trade that made complete sense if you kept Luka Doncic. It is top 2 protected, so maybe they will luck out, but they don't deserve any more luck than they already got with Cooper. Their 2028 first is going to be the least favorable of a swap between who else but the fucking OKC Thunder. Of course, they traded that first for Daniel Gafford, which makes sense if you kept Luka. Derek Lively also largely has injuries to blame on how disappointing he's been, but he was also visibly worse without Luka in the albeit limited sample that we've seen. And Kyrie Irving is still hurt today, and who knows what he can even still provide. ACLs aren't as debilitating as they used to be, but either way, at his age, if you're gonna trade him, you're not going to get much of a return. Their 2029 first was included in the Kyrie trade and is caught up in swaps between other teams, but they're not going to get any access to it. Their 2030 first round pick is also in a least favorable situation because they traded that pick for Grant Williams, which kind of made sense if you kept Luka. Still wasn't a very good deal either way, but it's a much worse one now. And their pick this year is all theirs, but the team isn't nearly as miserable as they were at the start of the year. Before firing Nico, Dallas was 3-8, and then after, they have since been 16-21. Part of that improvement has come from the cornerstone pieces of their future, aside from Flag. Their undrafted rookie Ryan Nembhard looks like a potential starting caliber point guard, which for a player under 6 foot is pretty rare to see. Shameless plug for the most recent deep dive before this one on small guards. Go check that out after this. The 23-year-old Max Christie, who is a part of the Luka trade, has been an absolute sniper this year, shooting a career-best 43.7% from 3 on just under 6 attempts per game, making him one of the best shooters in the NBA. And of course, Cooper Flag has been balling. He just had his best game as a rookie, where he put up 49 points on 20 of 29 shooting, and he has basically proven to be one of the very best 18-year-old players to ever play in the NBA. But unless Dallas gets incredibly lucky in the draft lottery again and they nail that draft pick, Cooper is going to spend a lot of time without any help, stuck making a bad team into a merely mediocre one. That's why any notion of Dallas competing for a play-in spot this year being some kind of success should be dismissed entirely. Getting mollywopped by the top dogs in a stacked Western Conference is not a preferable alternative to landing a top pick in a loaded draft when you won't have such an opportunity again for a very long time. If they're even bad enough by 2031 for that pick to even go in the lottery. Hopefully they wouldn't be, honestly, I don't know. After this year, they're getting either a mid to late first rounder from a swap or nothing at all until 2031, when Cooper Flag will be 24 years old, which for the record is how old Luka was at the start of 2024. They built a contender around Luka in the 6 years between his rookie debut and his finals debut, but they do not have the same capacity to achieve that now. Unless they nail it in 2026, there will be no substantial talent upgrades in Dallas for quite a while. That white boy is cold though. That catches us up with Dallas. Things aren't great, but they also could be a lot worse. But things in LA are probably all sunshine and rainbows, right? After their weak playoff performance, the Lakers had pressure to patch up the holes in this roster. Maybe they'd go after another big name, maybe they'd play it safe. Plus, weren't they supposed to give LeBron an extension? So how'd they do? Well, spoiler alert, they did technically do more in the offseason than Nico and the Mavericks. The Lakers didn't have the ability or the need to target more stars, nor did they have the ability to land top-billing established role players. Instead, they gambled on a few decent supporting pieces in Jake LaRavia, Marcus Smart, and DeAndre Ayton, with all three of them being wild cards in their own way. LaRavia had a very limited sample of actually good performances. Smart had spent the last few years bouncing around a bunch of bum-ass teams, and Ayton was, well, a soft-handed weenie. A really skilled soft-handed weenie, but a weenie nonetheless. And I'd say that these three have largely fallen right down the middle of what they could have been this year. Not too much bad, but nothing that exceptional. LaRavia is solid, sometimes great, but mostly solid. Smart's defense remains awesome, even if his shot selection is still headache-inducing. And Ayton, for all of his disappointments, is an incredibly efficient play finisher, so he pairs well with Luka on offense. And these additions are solid, but they don't exist in a vacuum. While the Mavs offseason was lackluster, they did manage to have virtually virtually 0 players depart from the team. Meanwhile, LA had some solid role players like Jordan Goodwin and Luka's bestie Dorian Finney-Smith walking away in free agency. So those additions look more like a slight upgrade at best more than anything else. And thus far, this season has been a mixed bag. I do think people tend to be a little bit too negative about this team because it's the Lakers, but there's reason to not be all that stoked. Let's look at everyone besides for Luka first. Austin Reeves has played like an all-star this year, which is a big deal now, but an incredibly big deal for their future. But besides for him, this roster leaves a lot to be desired. As much as I like Austin, his play style alongside Luka is fairly redundant. I don't really love the next best guy on that team being a guard who can't play any defense. LeBron oftentimes feels like he's just kind of here, which is not something that you'd ever say about LeBron basically any other year. And aside from Reeves, every other player on this team is pretty set in stone as far as their potential goes. I think if Rui had another year to go, he would have already done it, and their additions clearly don't. I mean, maybe LaRavia. Maybe. Unlike Dallas, they do have more of their future first-round picks than not, but because of the Stepien rule, they can't trade any of them till 2032. Luckily, they will be clearing nearly $120 million in cap space this offseason. Reeves will end up taking a chunk of that, but presuming they're willing to enter the luxury tax, they can sign a few top-billing guys and then use Austin's bird rights to go over the cap. Oh, and LeBron is a free agent this summer, so who knows what's going to happen there, but doesn't really feel like he's going to be sticking around Los Angeles. Beyond LeBron, the free agent pool this year isn't great, but if they bring in the right guys, they can build a true contender around Luka. If not next year, then surely the year after that when they have a lot more money to spend in a deeper free agency class. It's the Lakers, man. I'm sure they can pull off a proper retool. But whether or not the Lakers can get banner number 18 will primarily be up to number 77. And to be honest, and this is someone whose favorite player in 2024 was Luka Doncic, I'm beginning to grow skeptical of his true ceiling. Okay, before y'all freak out, the short answer to that question is no. I've just been seeing quite a few NBA fans start to float this hot take in the discourse. However, for me, what was previously a definitive no has turned into a no. But, like I said, I was rooting for Luka in 2024. Every year during the playoffs, I choose a team to pretend I'm a fan of while ignoring the Bulls doing literally nothing in the background. And in 2024, Dallas was my briefly adopted favorite team. At his best, it was actually insane how unstoppable Luka was, and in the 23-24 season, he was honestly my favorite player that year. His numbers were off of the charts, he got Dallas further than anyone expected, and he put on a hell of a show in the process. It feels weird to have to emphasize how great he was because this happened so recently, but because of the trade that followed it, people seem to have forgotten really quickly. And it's important we recognize that this wasn't that long ago, because this guy just isn't the same as this guy. And no, I'm not just saying that because of some defensive lowlights. At the time of recording, Luka is currently averaging a league-high 33.7 points per game, along with 7.8 rebounds and 8.8 assists, doing so on 61.7 true shooting percentage. These numbers are insane. Leading the league in scoring while flirting with a triple-double is ridiculous. But I'm just not seeing the same explosiveness, stamina, and fire that I saw in 2024 Luka. Nico Harrison was not right to trade him as we've discussed, but not all of his assessments about him were entirely wrong. A lot of this has to do with Luka just not being quite the athlete that he was. People like to fixate on his weight, but his speed declining has gone under the radar as a result of people just focusing on his gut. I know Luka is known for his slow, lull-you-to-sleep play style, But go watch young Luka, man. He just used to move in a completely different way. Hell, even just 2 seasons ago, Luka moved in a completely different way. People say Luka's game doesn't rely on athleticism, and sure, he doesn't need it to be good because he's obviously still ridiculously good, but Luka at his best did have more athleticism than people gave him credit for at the time, and especially do now. This lack of burst has affected his game in many ways, but primarily it has dramatically reduced the frequency of his drives. In his Dallas tenure, Luka took 17% of his shots from 0 to 3 feet. In LA, that number has been around 9% total and 7% in the 2025-26 season. That's a substantial drop. He just doesn't get to the rim anymore. And I mean, look at this overall trend. It is common for players to drive more when they're younger, but typically the difference isn't so stark and so apparent by year 4. I also think his lack of burst has affected his ability to create space on his step-back jumpers. The foundation of a step-back J is faking like you're going to drive, only to catch the defender off guard by stepping back. But when the threat of the drive isn't as present, it makes it a lot harder to sell that a drive is actually going to happen. As a result, Luka is taking the second most threes per game this year after Steph Curry, while shooting just 34.7%, which is 1.2% below league average and overall ranks 124th in the NBA. Now, Luka has managed to mask this by having a career year from mid-range, posting career highs from floater range and 10 to 16 feet, each being 8.6% and 9.7% above league average respectively. He has also been leaning even more into foul baiting. He is taking 11.3 free throw attempts per game, which is a full 1.7 more than second place this year. Luka Doncic is the only guy in the league attempting double-digit free throw attempts, which he didn't do in his 23-24 season. It was only about 8 then. So Luka is still putting up a very similar box score to that of his 23-24 season, but in a far more volatile way, making his presence on the team feel emptier than it ever really has. Every game, Luka is going to get his shots up. He's going to score at least 24 points, but whether it is a bad 24 or a great 40, it often doesn't even feel like it affects the results, at least not as much as it should. And his decline athletically hasn't helped his already lazy approach to the defensive end. But what really hasn't helped is the personnel around Luka. That is the Lakers' biggest issue. The 2024 Mavericks were successful because they had a ton of athletes and defenders around Luka who could pick up his slack on that end. The Lakers have no such athletes nor defenders. Obviously, we would all like to live in a world where Luka actually plays defense for real. But what's important to understand is it has been definitively proven. I cannot believe how never mentioned this is. It has been definitively proven that you can have a good playoff defense with Luka as your superstar, and a great playoff offense entirely generated by him. Dallas had the 6th best playoff defense overall and the 4th best out of the 8 teams to make it to round 2. Not amazing, but really good. Good enough, clearly. In fact, in the finals, the Mavericks held the Celtics to a 109 offensive rating, a whole 19 points lower than the 129 offensive rating they posted in the regular season. Defense isn't the reason they fell short. It was the offense outside of Luka. With the right pieces, you can get around Luka's defensive issues. No shit, it would be better if he didn't have a weakness, but Nico's assessment of Luka suggested that this weakness couldn't be overcome, when clearly it could. He proved it himself. He built that contender around Luka that almost won a championship, but he didn't seem to believe it. The real issue that Luka couldn't overcome is way bigger than just lacking effort on the defensive end. That is just a symptom of a bigger issue. The more I've watched Doncic this year, the more I've grown rather tired of his heliocentric play style. As I've hinted at before, I've said this like 5 times now, I do want to make a heliocentrism video on this channel someday, possibly soon, so I'll try and keep it quick. Again, heliocentrism in basketball terminology essentially means an NBA offense that revolves around a ball handler that is both a high-volume playmaker and a high-volume scorer. Think James Harden of the Houston Rockets, who Luka has understandably drawn comparisons to. This incredibly high-usage play style generates amazing numbers and plenty of regular season wins, but it always manages to find a way to come up short. In the case of Harden, his playstyle came up short to the greatest team of all time, so it's a bit hard to blame him for that. But Harden, to be honest, just clearly has better stamina than Luka to maintain his playstyle. I think a majority of NBA fans really do not fully appreciate just how much of a physical burden this offensive approach is, even for a younger, healthier Luka. Let's rewind a little further than we have to this point and check out Luka's second ever playoff series. In a 7-game rematch against the Clippers in 2021, Luka averaged nearly 36 points as well as double-digit assists while shooting 40% from outside. The Mavericks fell short primarily because the Clippers were just a better team. But the other major issue was the sustainability of Luka's offensive approach. The way most of these games would go is Luka would torch them in the first quarter, then have a damn good second quarter, an okay third quarter, and then he would just be ice cold by the fourth. In this series, he averaged 12 points in the first quarter on 63% true shooting, 10 points in the second quarter on 72% true shooting, then down to 7.7 points on 47% true shooting in the third, and an abysmal 5.7 points on 42% true shooting in the fourth. There's a few ways to interpret these numbers. You could come to the conclusion that Luka just isn't clutch, but yeah, no, that's clearly not the case. You can interpret it as the Clippers slowly but surely figuring him out as these games went along, but then why would those lessons learned not apply to the games at the tail end of the series, where he was still very much cooking them? You're telling me the Clippers figured out how to hold Luka to 0 points in the fourth quarter of Game 4 just to have amnesia resulting in him dropping 19 in the first quarter of Game 5? Yeah, that doesn't make much sense either. What I think these numbers indicate, as well as the eye test if you just go watch that series back, Luka was just getting gassed. Plain and simple. He'd come out of the gate and kill because he had the stamina for it, but when that second half comes around, the burden of his playstyle would begin to catch up to him. Luka plays with this entirely over-the-top usage and gets visibly burnt out by it. He's in year 7 now, and every year aside from his rookie season is one of the highest individual usage seasons ever. Last year was his lowest usage of his prime since he was recovering from so many injuries, and that season still ranks 65th all time. His lowest spot after that is 24th place, meaning of his 7 seasons, 5 of them are in the top 25 single-season usage rates ever posted. When a player is doing this much on offense, it more likely than not means that that player will not be giving you a whole lot of energy on defense. Of the 45 highest usage seasons ever, I would personally label only 16 of those guys as good defenders. And the list gets even shorter if you leave it to just guards. Only Kobe, MJ, and Dwayne Wade were able to pull that off at their peaks. Luka this year has had the highest usage of his career, which ranks 7th all time. Most offensive greats throughout history had both an on and off ball game. Usually one of them would stick out over the other, but they had the option available to diversify their approach. A big part of unlocking Michael Jordan to be the most effective offensive weapon the game has ever seen was by having him go run around screens. The triangle took the ball out of Mike's hands, had him move without the ball, and made him a far more dynamic threat, not to mention helped his longevity. In 2026, I don't even think Luka knows what off-ball movement is anymore. Half of the reason Luka's threes have been so bad this season is a lot of the ones that he throws up are just kind of for the sake of doing it. Like, shit, gotta get this 30 somehow, but getting to the rim is very tiresome, so I'm just gonna start throwing shit up there and hope that it works out. Luka barely has the fuel in his tank to maintain his ridiculous offensive output, so it is understandable when he doesn't have much to give on the other end. But dude, it is so bad now that he doesn't have anyone to cover up his mistakes anymore. I was really bought into the idea of Luka having a revenge tour, a season where he proves all of his doubters wrong after a disastrous and frankly slanderous year. But here's the thing, Luka averaging 34, 9, and 9 isn't proving any of his doubters wrong. Luka has objectively proven that he can do that. In fact, he has proven that he can do it better than he currently is. Averaging 34, 9, and 9 isn't proving any doubters wrong. The doubters didn't think that was his problem. Hell, Nico knew that he could do that. Being super efficient rather than just a little bit better than average, and at least a consistently good to okay defender would be proving the doubters wrong. That's what they believe you can't do, Luka. And if reaching those goals come at the sacrifice of some eye-popping box score stats, that's a worthy sacrifice. I, for one, would much rather see Luka average 26, 7, and 7 while playing way more defense and not constantly dominating the ball. But I'm not sure if that's something that Luka is willing to do. I hoped that JJ might get in his ear and try something that could be like the triangle to Luka's MJ, but no such luck. It's at a point where Luka's game feels like it is designed to generate the best possible stats while having the least amount of impact relative to how good those numbers are. It's still a lot of impact because there is no such thing as empty stats for 34, 8, and 9. But this 34, 8, and 9 and this 34, 8, and 9 are very different. This version of Luka is a less reliable three-point shooter and way less of a downhill threat. The two best elements of what should have been his MVP season are gone. Trading that in for more free throws and genuinely elite mid-range shooting has done the trick of keeping the numbers similar to that of 2024. But if I was an NBA defense, I would be thrilled to see him taking all these 16-footers, given the guy shoots in the mid-80s when he actually does the work to get to the rim. I think if this very fundamental element of Luka's game goes completely unchanged, then winning a title with him will be very daunting, more daunting than it needs to be. I'm not asking for Luka to go 50-50 on-off ball. That would be absurd. This man is a wizard with the ball in his hands. Obviously, you still want him doing most of the orchestrating. But could we maybe do a 70-30 split? Hell, I would happily take 80-20. That's better than what it's currently at. And if that kept him from being a cone on defense, then that is the most ideal version of Luka. Now, let's bring this back to the question, was Nico actually right? Almost all of the things that I just said about Luka are objectively true. My interpretation, maybe not, but all of those numbers are very real. Luka objectively has issues with usage, defense, staying in shape, and hookah. Where Nico was wrong was in thinking those issues were worth abandoning Luka entirely. That's the definition of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You know who else also took it kind of easy in the offseason? Shaq. You know who still takes it kind of easy in the offseason? Nikola Jokic. You know who took it easy in the offseason but still came one game short of beating the greatest roster of all time with his second option missing 2 games? James fucking Harden. Very rarely does a player with this level of talent come without some strings attached. Superstars bring burdens with them, but so long as the juice is worth the squeeze, you keep on squeezing. You try and make it work. Casting Luka away for these issues is like thinking that Superman is just some weak bitch because he can't handle kryptonite. Maybe the Mavericks select a top 3 guy in this upcoming draft, and he and Flag prove to just have way more upside than Luka alone did. But that shit would be a coincidence. That was not some grand design. And it is just so rare in the NBA to find a talent like Luka, and it should be the onus of every franchise that finds themselves with that rare opportunity to do what they can to make it work. Or at least, don't trade him for fucking Anthony Davis. Funny enough, after we got this video done, Anthony Davis was traded to the Washington Wizards for basically nothing, 2 completely garbage first-round picks and some expiring money. Very funny that that happened, but if you made it to this point, I appreciate you so much for watching this video in full. If you could drop a like, that would be appreciated. If you have not already, subscribe. And if you want to support the content beyond just your like and subscription, we do have a Patreon where you can get access to content early, as well as a private Discord with like-minded basketball fans, not people who strictly have the same opinions, but who like to share said opinions without being a complete asshole about it the way a lot of people on the internet are. But yeah, that's all. Again, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.